Hey there everyone, thank you so much for being here and thank you so much for watching. In today's video we are going to see how to create and configure VLANs in pfSense. I know this topic might seem a little intimidating at first, but it really isn't. And unlike a lot of other videos I saw out there online, we are going to create it end to end. I'm going to take you through creating the VLANs, configuring the interfaces for them, creating DHCP scopes for them for simplicity's sake, and even creating firewall rules for them, because in pfSense, much like many other firewalls, you can create VLANs all day long, but if you're not creating firewall rules for them, blocking or allowing, you're really not going anywhere. So we'll dive into the creation of the firewall rules. I'm even going to show you how to be a bit more granular in firewall rules, so definitely stick around towards the end of the video. So let's dive right in and see how to configure VLANs in pfSense. Join me. Alright guys, so we are at the computer, and as I said before, this topic might seem a little bit intimidating at first, but it really isn't. As long as you're configuring your VLANs correctly on your pfSense firewall and you have a VLAN capable switch that you have configured the VLANs on it to match the VLAN, specifically the VLAN tags to match the VLANs on your firewall, you will have a VLAN segregated network without any frustration or complications. So we already have the pfSense firewall interface in front of us. I will show you exactly how easy it is to create the actual VLANs themselves, and we will also see how to create firewall rules to allow traffic to go through them. Since it's a part of the process, I will show you at first how to create very generalistic and simplistic and permissive firewall rules just for the sake of this demonstration. And if you're interested in figuring out or seeing how to see more granular firewall rules that are a little bit more restrictive, stick around till the end of the video. I will circle back to the firewall rules and to see how we can do them a little bit more restrictive. So before we dive in VLANs, what we are actually doing is we are taking a single physical infrastructure, meaning a single cable. I'm dumbing it down, of course, and we are virtually splitting it to different networks. These are the VLAN tags, and the connection between the firewall and the switch itself is, let's say, for the just for the understanding of the concept, will be a trunk port. It will carry all the VLANs and we'll be able to take traffic from all the VLANs. And then on the switch itself, we can configure different ports to carry different VLANs as tagged or untagged VLANs. It doesn't matter for this purpose. And the end result, different computers will be able to be on a different network than other computers, even though they are sharing the same physical infrastructure. For example, the computers on the red network will be on their own separate networks, and the computers on the blue VLAN will be on their own network, and according to the firewall rules that we've defined, they will or will not be able to communicate with each other, but they will be on their separate networks. So this is VLANs really in a nutshell. Alright, circling back to the pfSense interface, we have a WAN interface, which is really a double net. It's a lab network that will cease to exist after this video. And we have a LAN interface. The management interface is not connected right now. We don't really need it. We are trying to keep it as simple as possible. One WAN port and one LAN port. And what we're actually trying to achieve is now taking the LAN port and virtually splitting it into different VLANs. The way we do it, first step is going to interfaces and assignments, and we're going to VLANs right over here. We'll click on add, and the first thing that you need to get right is the parent interface, meaning which of the interfaces on your firewall you want to split into different VLANs. In our case, it will be the LAN interface. VLAN tag is something that you can choose for your own. It's really up to you, from 1 to 4094. I've chosen 10 just for the sake of this demonstration. I'm gonna call it servers, just as an example. Click on save. Right, I'm going to create 2 more. Again, LAN interface, VLAN tag 20. Let's say that this will be our workstations VLAN. Alright, now all we have done right now, we have defined the VLAN tags. Actually, it's like we have taken a network cable and still we haven't punched it or crimped it with a network jack. If we want to take these VLANs take them into something pfSense can do something with, we need to create interfaces for them. For that, we are going to go back to the interface assignments tab. And now we have available network ports. They are not really ports. We'll choose our VLANs. Let's choose our VLAN 10 and click on add. Let's choose our VLAN 20, click on add. VLAN 30, click on add and save. Now we've created interfaces for all of our created VLANs. They are not active yet, but they are now entities pfSense can do something with. Alright, so opt2 is our VLAN 10 VLAN. Let's jump into it, enable it, give it a name servers, and now we need to give it an IP address. An interface needs to have an IP address, and let's say that in our case we will do 172.16, and for me I will choose 10 to represent the VLAN tag, so I will know every device that will get a 172.16.10 is on the server network. .1/24 and save. Apply. Without clicking apply, it will not really be written or committed. And now I'm going to go back to interface, to the interface tab, down to opt3. This is our VLAN 20, our workstation VLAN. So let's call it workstations. Again, IPv4. Give it an IP address of 172.16.20 to represent the VLAN tag. This is just how I do things. /24. Click on save. Click on apply. And the last VLAN is opt4, which will be our IoT VLAN static 172.16.30.1. So I will know every device that got an IP address of 172.16.30. something is on my IoT network. Oh, sorry, my bad. 24, not 14. That's great. Now, what I'm going to do next is not something that is obligatory or mandatory, but I am going to configure DHCP on all of these VLANs just so it will be easier for me to connect the device, especially for this demonstration, and immediately get an IP address, and I will see if the IP address matches my expectation. In order to do that, I will go to Services and DHCP Server, Servers tab, Enable, and I'm going to create a pool of 172.16.10. From 100, I will go to 200. I will define DNS server of 8.8.8.8 just for simplicity's sake. Nothing else is needed. Of course, if you're doing DHCP and you need other attributes, this will be the place to add them. I'm just going to click on Save. Workstations, again, enable it, create a pool. I will create it 172.20.100, going to 200, DNS 8.8.8. Alright, so now what we have done up to this point, we have created the VLANs, we have created the interfaces to match the VLANs, to actually take the VLANs and bring them into an entity that pfSense can do something with. We have enabled them.
we have created DHCP for them, but as it stands right now, if I'll connect my switch, and from my switch I will connect an endpoint, I may get a DHCP IP address, but I will be able to communicate with nowhere, nothing, zip, because unlike the default installation of pfSense where it automatically creates a rule on the LAN interface to be able to communicate with everything, the stars is a pfSense of saying everything. When you create a VLAN and an interface, you get no default firewall rules. So if I want my servers, for example, to be able to communicate and get, for example, internet connectivity, I will need to create a firewall rule. Now, I'm going to create a very simplistic, very permissive firewall rule. If you want to know how to do firewall rules a little bit more granular, of course, this is a topic on its own. And if you want to see a video just about managing firewall rules in pfSense, let me know in the comments down below. But I will circle back to this to create a little bit more granular approach, but right now I'm going to create a very general and permissive firewall rule. I'm going to select the action as pass, the interface is servers, protocol any, source. I'm always, just for a good measure, I will select the server's net, meaning the server's network, destination any, click on save, click on apply. Same for workstations, pass, protocol, any, source, workstations, net, source, destination, any, click apply. Same for IoT, any, IoT net, click on save, click apply. Alright guys, at this point, what we have right now is a end-to-end firewall that is configured with VLANs. The VLANs have interfaces assigned to them, and also firewall rules to allow traffic to go through them. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to connect the port that my computer is currently connected to on my pfSense firewall. I'm going to connect a managed switch I have lying around. This switch is already configured with the VLAN tags, same as I configured on the pfSense, and then I'm going to connect my computer to the switch, every port according to what I configured as an untagged VLAN, and let's see if I'm getting IP addresses according to the VLANs. Alright guys, something that I forgot to do, and I have encountered an issue with it. It almost never happens, but it happened to me right now, so I'm going to show you something that will mitigate it. I got a DHCP address from the VLAN I was connected to, but for some reason pfSense did not supply a default gateway as part of the DHCP list. We don't need to rely on DHCP, on pfSense favors to give us a default gateway. We can define one right here. For example, if I'm on the servers DHCP server tab, I'm going to define my default gateway as 172.16.10.1. Again, this almost never happens. It happened to me, so I thought I will show it to you so you will know what to do if it happens to you. By default, pfSense does supply default gateway that is the IP address of the interface itself, meaning the .1 address. For some reason, sometimes it doesn't do that, but again, we don't need to wait for pfSense's favors. Alright guys, so now my computer is connected again to the switch, and the switch is connected to the pfSense firewall. So let's see right now if we're getting an IP address according to the VLAN that we are on. Let's do an ipconfig release, and then ipconfig renew. Alright, great. Looks like we are getting an IP address from the VLAN that we have connected our switch port to. We're getting an IP a default gateway. That's great. I actually am not going to get a real internet connectivity because my pfSense is double netted and it's subjected to a firewall rule that will not allow it. But let's connect our computer to a different switch port on a different VLAN, and let's see that if we're getting an IP address from a different VLAN. Alright, let's do another ipconfig renew. Alright, great. Now we are getting an IP address from the workstation VLAN with a default gateway. That's great. One last check. Let's see if we get an IP address from the IoT VLAN. And as you can see, that's great. We've got an IP address from the IoT VLAN, meaning that we have configured the VLANs correctly on our pfSense firewall and on the managed switch to match the settings on the pfSense. And then we've configured switch ports. Every manufacturer of switches has its own UI and way to do things, but at the end of the day you need to figure out which ports you want to be untagged on a certain VLAN. And as you can see, when it's configured correctly, it works just fine. Okay, so just for the simple demonstration, I have connected my pfSense firewall to my ISP. So now I am connected directly to the internet and not double netting myself behind my UDM Pro. And let's do another IP config release, IP config renew. Just so you will be able to see that there is real internet connectivity when configuring firewall rules the way that we did. Let's try to ping www.google.com. We have internet connectivity and DNS resolving. So this is definitely something that is working great for us. Now I will be circling back to the firewall to show you how you can be more restrictive with your firewall rules. Let's say that I want to be more restrictive on my server's VLAN. Right now we have a rule that allows devices on the server's network to communicate with everyone. Let's delete this rule. And now what I have pre-done is create an alias. I have created an alias that contains the RFC 1918 addresses, meaning all the internal networks that are not routable on the internet. Just create an alias. It will be a networks alias. This will be the settings 10.0.8 172/12 192.168/16. That's the alias itself. This alias will now be used in a firewall rule. Let's go back to the rules on the server's VLAN. The first thing that I want to define is which other VLANs the server network is allowed to communicate with. So the first thing that I will do, again, this is just how I do things. You can do in a different order as you see fit. First thing I'm going to say, if the devices on the server's network want to communicate to anywhere else but internal networks, meaning the internet, this is how you should do it. The action is pass, protocol is any, source, servers, net, destination, click on invert match and select single host or alias, RFC 1918, click on save. What this firewall rule is actually doing is it's saying if you're on the server's network and you want to communicate anywhere that is not inside the RFC 1918 range of addresses, you can go ahead and do that. But let's create another firewall rule and say to block any protocol from the server's network to, for example, the IoT network. So what will happen then is it's saying if you want to go ahead and connect to anywhere that is not in the RFC 1918 range, go ahead. But if you want to communicate with the IoT network, I'm not going to let you do that. Alright, so actually, something that is very debatable, and indeed in production networks, I am going to do it this way. I'm going to do all my blocking rules on top. You can go ahead and just drag the block rules and click on save, click on apply. So then it will block everything, and then because firewall rules are processed from top to bottom, eventually it will reach a rule that allows the traffic that it's interested in and allow it according to the firewall rule. Again, let's do just one more rule. Again, I'm going to block any protocol from the server's network
to the, you know what, let's click on, let's make this rule as an allow from the server's network to the workstation network. And then I'm going to place it below my blocking rule. This is just an example. Again, this is firewall rules are a whole world you can dive into. This is just a basic example of how you can be more granular. By the way, I already created a video about configuring VLANs in the Unify ecosystem, but I know a lot of people are using the Unify, for example, just switches and access points, and firewall, they're choosing pfSense or different vendors of firewalls. This can communicate or inter-cooperate just fine. In fact, you can go over to my firewall, to my Unify VLANs video. I will put a link to it in the top right corner. And even though in this video I created the VLANs on a Unify gateway, in this case it was a UDM, you can skip to the second half of this video to know how to configure VLANs on your Unify switches, and that will work just fine with a pfSense firewall. Guys, it can work. VLANs is something that is universal. It's not vendor dependent. Alright guys, I hope this video was informative for you. I will see you all guys in the next video. Bye bye everyone, stay safe.